Hello, I'm Brett Albanese. I work for Georgia Department of Natural Resources in the Wildlife Resource Division and in the Wildlife Conservation section, and I'm also Georgia's State Wildlife Action Plan Coordinator. And so today I'm going to give you a brief overview of the SWAP, what we did for the 2025 revision, and then tell you how you can review and comment on the plan. So thanks for joining me. The State Wildlife Action Plan, completing one, is a requirement to receive funding under the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program. And this is a really important grant program. It's been our most stable source of federal funding over the last 20 years in the wildlife conservation section. Every dollar that we raise through fundraising or through the Give Wildlife a Chance license plate, every one of those dollars we bring in can be used to bring in $2 to $3 from the state and tribal wildlife grants program, also known as SWIG grants. So that's really important. But even more important than the money is this plan helps guide proactive conservation efforts before Georgia's animals and plants become rarer and more costly to conserve and restore. So the idea here is we want to be proactive. By implementing this plan, we might be able to prevent some species from requiring listing under official regulations at the state and federal level, like the Endangered Species Act. And also, if we're successful, we can actually recover some species and get them off the endangered species list. So that's the goal. Congress identified elements that must be included in state wildlife action plans. The plans must identify species of greatest conservation need and their habitats. They must identify threats, conservation actions, and monitoring plans for species and habitats. They have to be updated every 10 years. We did our first SWAP in 2005, revised it in 2015, and we're about to start our third SWAP period. In developing the plan, you have to engage other agencies, conservation organizations, and the general public. And this is really important because we want groups to have ownership of this plan so they'll help us implement it. We like to emphasize that this is not Georgia DNR's plan. This is Georgia's plan. From tiny snails to right whales, the SWAP is guiding conservation in Georgia. From surveys for bats, birds, plants, data we collect for long-term monitoring of species like sicklefin red horse and loggerhead sea turtles, habitat management efforts like prescribed fire, education and outreach events, and probably the most important thing we can do for the future of wildlife is permanently protecting conservation lands like the Ceylon track here on the Georgia coast. So the SWAP really guides all of these efforts and helps us prioritize working on these things. The SWAP revision was guided by technical teams, and these teams were led by Georgia DNR employees that have expertise with specific taxonomic groups of species, but also subject area experts on things such as climate change, habitat mapping, outreach, for example. So while these teams were led by DNR, we involved lots of people from outside organizations on these technical teams. In fact, over 100 different organizations are represented on these teams, and we're very proud of that. And these are people, at colleges and universities, other agencies, conservation organizations, and people that are retired but are experts in a specific species or subject area. So we really appreciate all the help they gave us in working on this. We also developed an advisory committee to provide high-level oversight of the SWAP throughout different phases of the revision. And this includes 35 decision makers from other agencies, conservation organizations, and stakeholder groups that utilize natural resources like Department of Transportation or Georgia Power, for just a couple examples. For the 2025 revision, we assessed the conservation status of over 1,400 native species using the NatureServe ranking methodology that looks at rarity, trends, and threats to species, as well as expert input. And after going through that process, 1,048 of those species meet our criteria to be designated as SGCN, or Species of Greatest Conservation Need. So that's a huge number. So we further prioritize that list based on the conservation status of each species within the state and the global significance of Georgia's population. So, for example, we put 258 species in our highest conservation concern category. In some cases, those are species that have their last remaining populations within our state. So our efforts are really important. And these species in this category are going to get the most resources and attention during the next 10 years. Next, we have 484 high conservation concern species, 171 moderate conservation concern species. And this is the part where we're really emphasizing proactive conservation. These species might be doing just fine right now, but they face some long-term threats that we want to address so they don't become rare in the future. And then finally, we have 135 data deficient species, and these are species where we just need more information. In most cases, just doing more surveys to find out how common or rare they are, and putting them on the SWAP list will allow us to spend state wildlife grant funds to do those surveys. So that's important as well. Technical team members identified the top 3 threats impacting each of these species right now, and then we classified those threats using this international threat classification framework. Okay, and so for example, 608 species are threatened by natural system modifications, and that includes things like draining wetlands, suppressing fire in fire-dependent ecosystems, dams that block movement of aquatic species, preventing them from, reaching their spawning habitats, for example. Pollution was the second most important threat, impacting 439 species, and this is primarily aquatic pollution and runoff that impacts aquatic species. Residential and commercial development was the third highest threat, followed by climate change, and then number 5, we have invasive species and non-native diseases and pathogens that impact wildlife, things like highly pathogenic avian influenza. I'm sure you've heard about that. And these other threats are also important, but weren't ranked as highly. And the purpose of identifying threats is that helps you identify the most appropriate conservation actions. We identified over 3,500 single species conservation actions, about 3 to 4 actions per species on the list. So that's a pretty big number. So again, we decided to think about some bigger picture actions where we could address the conservation needs for multiple species and habitats simultaneously. And so we did that. We got about 100 of these, and we want to do a better job in the next SWAP of tracking our implementation of these conservation actions. And so we developed this thing we're calling the Conservation Action Tracker. And on the left here, we have these big picture conservation actions. There's over 100 of them in here, okay? And on the right, we have conservation projects. And these are specific projects that were completed to support implementation of one of these bigger picture conservation actions, okay? And just show you how to use this a little bit. If you go into this site, you don't want to read through all 100 of them. You can filter them by title or category. And so in this case, I typed in the word survey up here, and I got a list of actions that contain the word survey. Then I selected one, which is completing distributional surveys to assess current range, conservation status, and to identify best populations of species. Okay, so there's the big picture action, and once you click on that, you get more information a more thorough description of what the action is, some potential partners in the action, what species would benefit, and then also further down here, you'll see a list of potential projects that might be completed. On the right side of this, once you have clicked this, you'll get the surveys that have been completed in support of the action. So there's only 2 here right now, and this is because we just built this site, and the idea is that we'll add projects to this as we implement the next swap. So I'm going to just click on one of the projects here, and this is a status survey for the Goldline Darter. And you see where that survey was completed in the Coosawattee Drainage in northwest Georgia, near the town of Ellijay. And then you also get more information from the survey, like how many sites were sampled. You'll get a abstract describing the results of the survey, and you might be able to download a report or at least get a reference from the project. So we think this will be a really useful tool, and it's not just for Georgia DNR projects, it's for any of our partners that want to send us the information of a project that was completed in support of these swap actions. So in the past, we've had swap priority watersheds, and we updated that statewide data set for the revision. And the purpose of these priority watersheds is to promote watershed level conservation practices that protect and improve habitat for freshwater and marine SGCN. So, and we developed this really nice viewer where you can look at these watersheds. And here's an example right here. It's zoomed in to North Georgia. And what you see are all these different, they're called Huck 10. They're basically medium-sized watersheds. And they're different colors based on the priority level. And so the red ones and the orange ones are the highest priority, and yellow is lower priority. And they're prioritized based on the number of species of greatest conservation need that are present within the watershed, which is then also weighted by the priority level of each of those species. So the highest priority watersheds have a lot of species in that highest conservation concern category. So here we've clicked on Amicalola Creek, where Amicalola Creek Falls State Park is, and we find out that, click on that, we see that there's 10 SGCN present. The total priority score for the watershed is 21. The maximum possible score is 67. That's still pretty high. And then we also see that 39, almost 40% of the watershed is protected on permanent conservation lands. That's pretty awesome. 62% of the watershed is covered by habitat cores, and these are basically large patches of natural land cover, primarily forest. Okay. We also see that 7% of the watershed is currently developed, but based on a model completed by NC State for the whole Southeast, 20% of the watershed is expected to be developed in 2050. And aquatic species and habitats are very sensitive to developed land cover because it changes runoff patterns and water quality. And so that's actually a pretty big increase in development. So that's really important information for conservation planning. Also, you'll get a list of all the species known from the watershed when you click on each watershed, so that's pretty useful as well. All right, so just to show you, get a drink of water here. Just to show you how you can use this tool. Now, before I click this filter, there are high priority watersheds across the entire state. They vary in their priority level, but we have rare aquatic species all over Georgia, so that's an important point. But you can filter this and say, ask questions like, how many watersheds have more than a third of their land protected by permanent conservation lands? And so you apply that filter and you see these are the watersheds that meet that criteria. A lot of them up in national forest land, but we also have some important ones on military lands in the Altamaha Corridor and Okefenokee Swamp. So you can also do that for habitat cores, development, and future development. So that's a useful way to learn about Georgia's watersheds. All right, so that was primarily for aquatic species. Conservation opportunity areas. This is for both conserving aquatic and terrestrial species of greatest conservation need. And these are areas where we want to focus conservation efforts on the highest priority public lands and to encourage voluntary conservation on the highest priority private lands. And just want to point out that the swap is non-regulatory. We're not going to make anybody do anything. This is just a plan to guide and motivate conservation. Conservation opportunity areas include two components: hubs of high quality habitat. These are large patches of high quality habitat. They often contain existing protected lands. And then corridors that allow movement of species between the hubs. And that's really important to allow species to move across the landscape to complete their life history needs, or maybe just to move to a new area if habitats become unsuitable in a place. So we want to include these corridors as well. This is what it looks like. This is the hubs are shown. Those are the dark olive places, and the corridors are the places that connect them. And corridors also can contain high quality habitat. This is based on a GIS model that puts the corridor through the best remaining habitats in the area. Okay, so now we recognize two things. One, just want to say clearly, we're not going to try to buy all the hubs and corridors. Like, we don't have that I mean, I would love to do it. We don't have that kind of money, and it wouldn't be politically feasible. And also, people live in these areas. These are often working lands that contain forests and farms, but they also contain good wildlife habitat. And so these are areas where we want to encourage people to do things like, work with NRCS to implement BMPs on farms, best management practices, or maybe apply for a Georgia Outdoor Stewardship grant to, get a trail system in the corridor and, protect some of that land from development. All right, so we, just like the watersheds, we developed a conservation opportunity area viewer. And so you can click on any of the hubs or the corridors, and when you do, you get more information about them. For example, you get a list of all the species that have been recorded within the spatial unit, whether it's a hub or corridor. And this is based on data in our biotics database. So there could be other species out there that will be discovered in new surveys. You'll find out that 10% of this land, this is a granite rock outcrop corridor near Atlanta, between Covington and Atlanta. About 10% of that land is currently in permanent conservation land. About a third of it includes those large patches of natural vegetation called habitat cores. 24 SGCN are present, and you also see that 18% is currently developed, but that's supposed to increase a lot between now and 2050, up to 57%. That is a major growth corridor because of I-20 there. So that's really important information for conservation planning. One thing you don't see here is that for these corridors and hubs, we also give a priority score based on the species that are present. So that's good information. All right. So thanks for bearing with me. I know that's a lot of stuff I've been talking about, but we have basically completed the science part of the swap revision, and we've pulled all the information to get together, and we're ready to share it with a broader audience and get some input on it. Our GIS team has developed this really nice portal where you can go and get all the swap information. Okay. And so when you go to this site, you will see those three web applications I mentioned: the Action Tracker, the Conservation Opportunity Area Viewer, and the Watershed Viewer. You also find the story map. So our last swap was awesome, 2015 swap, but it is a huge PDF document, and it can be hard to find things. You just get overwhelmed looking at it. The idea behind these story maps is they kind of break the information down into smaller, more digestible pieces, and also have a lot of pretty pictures to look at as well. So in each story map, you'll get a list of the species, the habitats, threats, conservation actions, conservation partners. Okay, and we have a statewide story map that's big picture stuff, and then we have 4 story maps that just focus on freshwater and marine species. Okay, and those are for the Coosa-Tallapoosa Basin, the Tennessee drainage, the Atlantic slope rivers like the Altamaha, and then Gulf slope rivers like the Chattahoochee and Flint. And then we also have story maps for our major ecoregions, Ridge and Valley, Blue Ridge, Piedmont, 2 coastal ecoregions. And then just want to point out that not all of these story maps are complete. The basic information is included, like all the species that are present, but we haven't finished adding all the pictures and writing up all the text. So some of them are going to say under construction. The statewide one is mostly done, as are the Coosa-Tallapoosa and the Tennessee, and the Blue Ridge ecoregion one should be done by February 19th. So we'll be continuing to work on these, but you'll be able to look at them now and see what's in them. We also have a guide to the revision. So if you want to understand the methods that we use throughout the revision, this is where you'll go. And it's just a PDF document. It includes an executive summary, a glossary of terms, what organizations were on technical teams and the advisory committee, more about our methods, references, and that sort of information. We also have, if you want to, drill down and get more specific about a specific taxonomic group, we have these technical team reports that are on the website. This is one for freshwater species, and these are useful. All right, so final thing, I think, is the Georgia Biodiversity Portal. This is a resource that we already have available, and ultimately we want to have full profiles completed for all 1,048 species of greatest conservation need. Right now, if you go to our website, you'll see that we have at least this amount of information right here for each one. It's basically a picture of the species, its current status under the SWAP, what its priority tier is. So this is sicklefin redhorse, its highest conservation concern. You also get a list of the threats identified by the technical team, the conservation actions, and you also get a map that shows where the species has been documented within the state. And these maps are really quite useful. They're color coded based on the last time a species was seen within an area. So this is the Brasstown Creek watershed, and we monitor sicklefin redhorse there every year, and we know that the population is still present. So it's green here instead of one of these other colors. So now we're ready for your input. The public input period starts February 19th and ends March 21st. And during that time, we invite everyone to submit comments to us, and we're going to use those comments to improve the SWAP. After that, we will submit it to the Fish and Wildlife Service for their approval, and then we'll have hopefully a final SWAP by October of this year. On this page right here, you can get a link to that portal with all the story maps and other engaging content. You can get a recording of this presentation. I don't think anyone's going to want to watch it again, but maybe you want to send it to a friend who wants to know more information about the SWAP. This is a survey that you can go to. So you click on this link here and you go to that survey, and that'll guide you through the commenting process. And then we also have a link to our 2015 SWAP for comparison. And this is a really great resource, and we are going to keep it up on our website. It won't be our official SWAP once this one's approved, but it still is going to have useful information in it. So what are we looking for in the survey? We're going to ask you to rank all the conservation actions and the web applications. We're going to ask you to offer up any other conservation actions that you think we missed. We'll ask you to suggest partners and potential projects for conservation actions. If you find any problems or glitches with any of the web tools, we want to know about that so we can fix them. We're not too worried about editing or wordsmithing. We're going to go through everything again. We do want to know if something is just incorrect or, written in a way that's not clear. So, and just want to emphasize that, this is a big, just like this presentation is a little long. The swap is pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of different pieces to it. If you just want to look at one part of it and give us some comments on that, that's valuable. So please consider that. And I wanted to thank you all for supporting conservation of Georgia's wildlife and for watching this presentation. Thanks. Bye. Oh, and today is Super Bowl Sunday, but for wildlife people, it's also Superb Owl Day. And this morning, I actually did hear 2 great horned owls in Oconee County. So that was kind of cool on this, holiday.